Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, the East Bay's best podcast. Hosted by Jared Asch, bringing you in-depth conversations with the leaders shaping your community.
Today, we are going to head up to Solano and the potentially new city that is taking place in the California Forever movement. And today we are joined by Jim Wunderman, who is the head of public affairs. That's the title for California Forever, the effort that has been talked about in the media. But we're going to dive into depth of what is happening, what are their plans, and we'll go from there. I could also point out Jim was, I believe, on episode 9 of the podcast, back one of my earliest guests, where he was legendary from the Bay Area Council. He served as CEO for a long time, a fixture here in the Bay Area before he left after more than 20 years of service to join this movement at California Forever. Thanks, Jim, for joining me again.
Thanks, and thanks for calling it a movement, because I think that's I think it is a movement, and it's about time we started building at scale again in this state. We used to dream big and do big, and we stopped. And it's time to start. I think we see the effect of that, and it's time to start addressing our challenges and our opportunities at scale. And California Forever is just all about that. I couldn't be more excited to join something historic that could really change the game for Solano County, for the Bay Area region, and the state.
And Jim, for those of you people who are just familiar with the headlines, what is California Forever? What is this land? Give an overview of the concept, where it is, what's happening.
Thanks. It's an area of land that's really completely undeveloped, that went completely undeveloped in Solano County. I would call it South Central Solano County. It's between the city of Suisun City to the west and Rio Vista to the east. And it's a number of miles. If you drive across Highway 12, you'll drive through this land, and you'll note there's nothing built there, really. There's nothing growing there. It's farmland that doesn't grow stuff because it's very thick clay soils, unlike other areas of Solano County that has very fertile farm. This is not that. And it probably should have been developed years ago. It was planned and thought about by Association of Bay Area Governments and by the Army Corps of Engineers and others who historically looked at planning the future of the Bay Area, said this should be an area of growth, and would naturally be one of growth when they were looking at Dublin Pleasanton, where there had been no growth, and Walnut Creek, where there hadn't, and they said these would be areas that would grow, and this part of Solano County would grow, but it didn't. No growth, or what they call orderly growth movement in the 1980s hit, and their voters took a vote of the people and said unincorporated county land couldn't be developed without annexation by a city. In Solano County, some of the growth that has taken place happened because cities annexed different areas. But this area wasn't annexed by anybody and just stayed the way it is, which is just fine for a lot of people because some people don't like a lot of growth. And this is a county that's almost 90% undeveloped. It actually has an economy that's been shrinking. We've seen where there have been, the nature of the economy of Solano has been a manufacturing, blue-collar county, and we've been losing jobs there for a while. And then lately, some big closures were announced: the closure of the Valero oil refinery in Benicia, the closure of the historic Budweiser brewing plant along I-80 is closed now. The Budweiser sign is down. The Mare Island Dry Dock announced its closure. Harbinger, which is producing houses and factory-built housing, put out warn notices to its employees. There were shrinkages in Jelly Belly. This candy factory. There's just a lot of negative growth that's taking place in Solano. Of course, it's worrying a lot of people because these were real jobs and good jobs for people and their families that people relied on. Now you've got a long line of unemployed people, a couple of thousand at this point. It could be more. That there's no easy answer for this, except there is. And the answer is to develop that area, that undeveloped area of Solano that I described. A young ceramic who came from the Czech Republic after in his 20s and came and had some financial success in business, and then found this land and asked himself, why is this undeveloped? Did some reconnaissance over the course of over a year, just questioning his own concept that this could become a new city, and the first new city in our state and our country in generations. And when he couldn't talk himself out of it, he started buying it up and then found investors to support that. And then it's now about 70,000 acres of pretty much contiguous land in this area. And the concept is to develop it into a new city that's a dense urban city, like a real city, vibrant city, adjoining a large manufacturing park on 2,100 acres, advanced manufacturing, where people will have the opportunity to live in a cool place and work in a cool place. And there won't be much distance between the two. In fact, they're literally adjacent. And then later on, a shipyard down to the south end of the county along the Sacramento River as it enters San Francisco Bay. That's part of the land holding. And the concept there is to develop America's newest and biggest shipyard. America needs shipyards. We fell out of the shipyard business. That was a legacy industry of the Bay Area. The Kaiser and Bechtels and those folks, those were the industrialists that formed the Bay Area Council back at the end of World War II, in the mid-40s. And that's what they were doing, is they were building all this ships and equipment for airplanes and other war-related stuff. And then over the course of the next generation or two, we really got out of the shipbuilding business. And then America did too. And the shipyards that are in America are mostly lined up on the Northeast United States. They're small. They have limitations. And China last year built 1,000 large ships, and America built 3. So this is a problem. If you go to Washington, they don't agree with each other on a whole lot back there. But the parties agree on this, that we need to get back into shipbuilding business. There's a lot of impetus to do this and a lot of money in the budget to do it. And I think it's going to happen. And the question is, will it happen here? The West Coast is largely devoid of this capacity, but there's a lot of concern about the Pacific theater. We really need to get ships built on the correct side of the Panama Canal in America.
I think that's a great overview. And I can tell the audience, I've personally driven every public road in this territory of the 70,000 acres. And I know that farmland comes up a lot by conservationists, that this is fertile farmland, that these are goat farms and cow farms, but it really isn't at any scale. And Jim talked about it. This is not prime ag land. This is hard clay soil. When we're talking about cow farms, we're talking 100 cows, 120 cows, and dozens of goats. We're not talking about large scale operations like you could see in the Central Valley. And I could say that from experience of driving this. Jim, do you want to allude a little bit more maybe on those points that others have shared?
Yeah, over the 70,000 acres, there's a fair amount of it that's marshland that is, I don't know if you'd call it overly fertile farmland. There's some orchards, there's some things like that. But a lot of it is environmentally valuable land. And we don't intend to build on any of that. That's land that can be preserved. There's also land in between Highway 12 and Travis Air Force Base that's also environmentally valuable land, but it's important to protect Travis Air Force Base to make sure that their operations remain not impacted by anything. Part of this would be to protect that area. The lion's share of the land, we're not looking at developing more than at most around 20,000 acres of that land, leaving a whole bunch of it in very green and very and probably a lot more accessible to the public. If you go out there now, you won't see any people out there doing anything on this land. A lot of it is inaccessible, and that can be changed. Part of the plan for the city is to build a phenomenal park right down the middle of it, miles long, along a tributary of the Sacramento River, where there'll be nature and a lot of incredible opportunity for people to actually experience the environment in a real positive way, as well as green spaces, greenways, forth in the city itself. This is meant to be, I see the city itself as, we're talking about a dense urban city, as I mentioned, minimum 20 units to the acre. In some cases, I think it's going to be a lot more. And where people don't need a car, we're going to try to keep cars to the extreme end of the city so that people are walking and biking and able to enjoy their community, slow streets, things like that. Applying the things we've learned about what makes cities great here in America and in Europe and other places. And this is what we're not looking at a sprawl by any means. This is a real city with 4- and 6-story buildings and row houses and things like that. If you go online at californiaforever.com, you can see it. There's a specific plan that you can page through, but it's really exciting what's possible and what Jan and his team have come up with in coming up with a city that could be like the model for future cities in America, and basically also being able to provide housing at scale that people could afford, market rate housing that people could afford to buy, starter homes, $450,000. This isn't a community that's meant for extremely wealthy people. This is meant for working class people, many of whom will work in the advanced manufacturing factories and the shipyards, and the people who actually build the houses will live in the houses. A lot of that will happen. And we have one of the things that Jan did was work out a labor agreement with the California Building Trades, the Napa Solano Building Trades Council, which is part of the California Building Trades, and the North Coast Carpenters Union, and making sure that the construction that happens is largely done by union workers and that people are going to be well paid. And we don't want to create a community on the backs of the workers, and we won't be doing that. This is going to be, it's idyllic, really. I think that was one of the things that really attracted me to it, was it's a lot of very forward thinking about this. Also the shipyard. I'm the chairman of the ferry system, SF Bay Ferry. And right now we're manufacturing the first battery electric passenger ferries in America, but we're doing it in Washington State, which frustrates me, frankly, because I think we should be building our ships. The major funding source for these are tolls that people pay to create a transit alternative for crossing the bay. And we should be building them in the Bay Area. We used to, and I think we will again. Since the time I started talking about that a few years ago, this subject has really heated up, and there's a lot. Cal
Maritime Academy
took over the operation of Cal Maritime in Vallejo, the Mare Island. With the closure of the Valero oil refinery, is, I think, more interest in Benicia, Vallejo itself, Antioch, going across the strait, Antioch, Pittsburgh, everyone very interested in seeing this industry return, which would create phenomenal job creation opportunities for the Bay Area and also balance our economy. I think everybody kind of knows we've got a lot of very wealthy people doing a lot of very wealthy things in technology and AI and all of that. And then we have people who are struggling. There's a struggle going on in this region amongst people who it's expensive and people are having a hard time making it. And this could really answer the question of what a young person growing up in Solano County or other parts of the region, certainly not just Solano, could do with their life. Be trained in a very reasonable period of time to do these jobs of the future, and building ships for the Navy or commercial ships or materials, equipment that's related to that. When I found out about that part of it, that's when I got involved, and I talked to Jan and I told him how excited I was about it. Ultimately, he asked me if I thought he should hire a public affairs person, and that led to this.
I think that's great. And there's a couple of key things I want to take away from what you said. The first is Travis Air Force Base. A lot of the opposition to this growth has raised concerns over Travis Air Base and protecting that. But you have no plans to do anything to jeopardize Travis. Can you talk through that for a moment?
I believe the original plan that was laid out caused some concerns at Travis. Jan worked that out with Travis, the leaders at Travis Air Force Base, and made sure that we backed up away from the base to ensure that their operations, could continue now and in the future unscathed. And that's like a core value of what we're doing. Protecting Travis that's the major employer of Solano County. First and foremost, to do that, half the people who work at Travis, they commute really long distances to San Joaquin County and Sacramento County and other places where they could afford a home or a place to live. And this is going to provide a lot of opportunity for people who work at Travis to live near Travis. It's miles away, and we're, as I mentioned earlier, we're literally creating the separation, preservation of that area. But we're being very thoughtful about this and very much in communication with the base. And we sponsored the big Wings Over Solano event a couple of weeks ago, which was very successful. And the relations between, I would say, California Forever and Travis Air Force Base are good. There's good communication. And we, of course, value what was happening. Travis is a very important military installation in the United States, and we have to protect it.
No. Let's talk about this advanced manufacturing innovation platform that you guys are trying to create. The shipbuilding is one component. Let's take that as a separate item, but talk about this advanced manufacturing past ships. What do you see? And we've heard these promises before about jobs coming to the region. Why is this different in terms of bringing advanced manufacturing?
I think advanced manufacturing wants to be here. We've made it difficult for that to happen by having laws and regulations that slow down process. We've designed a system that basically says no rather than yes. Other states have been way more competitive, and we've seen this for example, in the CHIPS Act, where our neighbor Arizona is making the chips that are designed here and creating thousands of jobs and opportunities there. And the same is happening in Nevada, and the same is happening in Texas. And I think we all know Salt Lake, Utah, we all know this story. And it's time to change the story. And we can do that by having California take a different attitude toward advanced manufacturing and see this as an opportunity to have manufacturing taking place close to the place where these technologies are designed, largely in Silicon Valley. And it would be advantageous for Silicon Valley companies to not have to put their management on a plane to check into where the manufacturing is happening, which is key. And also, ultimately, the innovation comes out of the manufacturing process. We're losing out on that. We need to bring it back. And I think for a long time, we thought that wasn't realistic. But I think as what's happened is people are having changed attitudes about that. President Biden was all over this. President Trump is all over this. Congress is all over this. They've put up money to facilitate this. There are big conversations going on. And I think Californians' attitudes are changing. I think there was a view that manufacturing is dirty. We shouldn't have it here in the Bay Area. I think that attitude is changing. And the reality is manufacturing doesn't have to be dirty at all anymore. We're not talking about smokestack factories of the 1890s here. Things have advanced, and we are capable of building clean and very efficiently, and I think very competitively, if we just allow ourselves the opportunity here.
Your friend Matt Regan was on an episode talking about that, right? If to manufacture, or for a person living in Texas or Arizona or Nevada, compared to California, the emissions are so much greater, the pollution that they do by not having as clean of a grid, by not having as many regulations. It's finding the balance of how to do that manufacture cleanly, like you're talking about. And there's an advantage to doing that here in California.
Without question, I think we've backed ourselves into a corner with laws and regulations, which are, I think, probably well intended, but they haven't worked. We haven't actually reduced greenhouse gases through a lot of VMT laws and things like vehicle mile travel laws and things like that. We have to rethink. You take an action, you create a strategy, and then you review it. Is it working? And look at the overall effect of it. And what Matt Regan is talking about is that the same person, a person with a job here who creates X GHGs in a year, creates 3X in Texas. And that's not taken into account in the regulations that oversee the creation of these jobs. They only measure what gets created. It's not done on a comparative basis. I think it's not that it's wrong, it's crazy not to do that, because the people are going to live somewhere. We've actually had a loss of population in California and in this region. These people went somewhere. What happened before they went and what happened after they went? We should be measuring that, and that should become the standard for how we view these rules. This city will be the lowest per capita GHG producer in America, aside perhaps from New York City, because of its dense urban nature, because of the focus on transit rather than cars, a whole number of reasons in its design, because it's a modern design that allows us to do that. But that doesn't count, because it's only what you create. It's not done. These jobs, if these houses go to another state and create 3 times as much, that's fine for California, but that's not fine for the environment, the atmosphere. We know that. And let's get realistic and let's analyze what we've done and what we could be doing better. I think that movement is afoot now, although I don't know how much traction it's had, and there's pushback because there's a lot of folks that are just heavily invested in these things, and they're not that, frankly, open-minded about it. But hopefully we'll change some minds.
Okay, let's dive into shipbuilding more. You alluded to it. The U.S. military, if they're building 3 large ships a year and China's building 1,000, how do we stay competitive in not just military, but in civilian vessels, the ferries you mentioned? Is this a pipe dream? Why would the U.S. military put something in California? Do we have the resources to do it? If it's Trump, why doesn't he say, I'd rather put this in Louisiana on the Gulf Coast, a red state, versus the Blue Bay area? Talk us through what you guys are thinking here and the likelihood of this happening. And what are the impacts of the economy? I know that's a big set of questions in one.
It's going to take some work and some discussion and convincing. From the United States point of view, when we talk to a lot of folks in the various aspects of the defense and military and the White House and those things, despite the not strong love for California, let's put it nicely, there is recognition that we need West Coast shipyards again, because right now the ships are all being built east of the Panama Canal, and that's dangerous. Because we need those ships out at sea, and they can't look at what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, right? If something happens and we can't get the ships through the Panama Canal, you're looking at having to go south of Argentina to get it. That's not realistic. We need to be able to build where we can get ships out in the Pacific Ocean from a military perspective. That, I think, is one of the issues that's driving some conversation in Washington. But it's also a balancing out of the economy. I think from a California standpoint, we need to be thinking about, we have deep water ports, we have historic infrastructure, we have a very large labor force of trained workers who are in many cases, being underutilized. Certainly the 2,000 who were laid off recently just in Solano County, and Solano County is not alone in this, are available to be retrained And there's a chance here to do something that's different, maybe unexpected, but it's not like we don't have some advantages. And this particular area has long been looked at by the United States as a future shipyard for America. It goes back generations and studies were done that pointed to this. And it's actually zoned maritime industrial. It went through an EIR back in 2008, certified, and that's what it is. It's seen as a place for this purpose by Solano County today, which reaffirmed that in a vote 5-0 last September, calling on the state of California to expedite the process by which this could become a shipyard. There's a lot of excitement about this. When you poll the public is way behind it into the 60s and beyond for doing this. There's a lot of people who are here whose families attached to the building of our vessels. Personally, my dad served on a Liberty ship in World War II that was built in Richmond. And he served on Mare Island on that vessel. And when we were East Coasters, people were brought here by the Navy because of the importance of the Pacific Ocean and what was going on at the time. I think it's going to take a push, going to take some convincing, going to take some negotiation, but I believe this can happen. And it's going to take the public. I think the public has to stand behind this and say, we want it. And we want our kids to have jobs in the future. Right now, I think in Solano, as an example, and it's not only Solano, there's some real questions amongst young people in high school or college as to what they're going to do. There's definitely a squeeze of jobs through AI and just efficiencies and automation and those things that have been happening. And this is an opportunity to balance out the economy, to add back in blue-collar jobs that we need. And today's blue-collar jobs, it's a little mix of things, because it's machines, it's people, it's administration. It's not just people working on a line, as we might imagine, but it's a combination of different skills that go into producing the vessels of the future, the machines of the future, and forth.
And what do you need to have this vision come true, to bring this large scale operation?
Well, I think that there is a company that's looking, it's a Texas company that's looking at this site that has naval contracts to build autonomous naval vessels, which are the future. That's the direction things are taking there. I'd certainly like to see I think the vessels we're building in the state of Washington that are zero emission vessels, ours happen to be ferries, but it's certainly not limited to ferries or commercial vessels. That's a future industry in the world. That's where the world is going. I go to these zero emission ferry conferences because of my nature of my job. And we could be the headquarters of that industry here because we care about zero emission vessels. We have technologists, and for us, I think that we could see the growth of new, different kinds of industries that are maritime in nature begin to sprout up here. And it's not just for the shipyard we're talking about. That part of Solano, it's Mare Island, it's Benicia, it could be Antioch and Pittsburgh, Alameda, Sausalito, San Francisco. I think there's a lot of possibilities. The Delta, West Sacramento, Stockton, where there are shipyards. This could be a regional effort. And we've even put together the makings of what we call a maritime prosperity zone, which is talked about in the Ships Act, which Congressman Garamendi is one of the co-authors of that act with a fellow Democrat senator and a Republican senator and a Republican congressman to actually have an act which has been in play for years, which could actually get passed this year and signed by the president. And the president's put out an executive order on this, and the Commerce Department has been given the role of driving this forward. And there's money in the budget, like big money. And the defense budget of America has been expanded almost geometrically. We're looking at, I think, a lot of opportunity to fund this. And I can't say enough about Cal Poly and Jeff Armstrong, who is the president, who's put a lot of his own personal effort into this, and Corey Cook, who's been hired to run that operation in Solano. There's a lot of movement in this direction. Getting the training regime together to get people ready for these kind of jobs is big. We haven't done that in California. We've had this kind of white collarish attitude about you go to high school, then you go to college. A lot of people aren't meant for that, or they don't want that. And there may not be jobs for that. Going back to a more working class economy, or at least balancing out the economy have with that, I think is exciting and necessary, and will be very helpful to keeping people here and giving opportunity to people who may not have that much of people who are on a second chance and coming out of state prison or local county jails and have an opportunity here to take on a career. This is exciting stuff, man. I love the thought of it, and I think we can do it. And it's just going to take determination and getting the community organized around it.
Talk about that new poll. You mentioned that people in Solano are supportive of the shipbuilding effort. For a while, the California Forever folks were pushing a ballot initiative, weren't so popular, didn't even make it to the ballot. Talk about what this new poll is telling you for the direction, how your work in the community has evolved. I think that would be great.
We are very active in the community as in providing information to people as to what this expansion, we're not actually talking about building a new city. We're talking about expanding Suisun City, because the law says we can't build in the unincorporated area, which is why there was no ballot measure. But you can grow by expanding an existing city. Suisun City wants to grow. It's been landlocked, blocked off from expansion to the west by the expansion of Fairfield. The only direction, if you go south from Suisun City, you head right into the marsh. And if you go north, you head into Travis Air Force Base. The only growth Suisun City can have is to the east. And its Mayor Alma Hernandez and his city council have voted continuously to explore this expansion. There's an environmental impact report very much in process. I'm told it's over 20,000 pages already, because the idea is a large area of land, and it's to really look very carefully and deeply into every inch of this land, so that eventually we can have a certified EIR that covers the manufacturing, the housing, and all of that. And then if a company wants to come in and build a factory, they don't have to go through an EIR. It's already been done, and we can offer them a lease and start building in 90 days. That's the concept of this. It's different. And that's covered under current law. That doesn't really require a change in law. And we're not avoiding the environmental process. The city is deeply immersed in that process, and we're supporting that. I think we will need to try to figure out ways to make this happen faster. There's just too many ways in California for people to slow down good ideas and good opportunities. We see it all over in Bay Area Council. I think that was a big part of my job, was to identify where those things could happen. And as we passed a lot of laws, particularly around housing, to make things happen faster and better. And that's happening. We've seen that. And this can be part of that, I think, of that movement that's taken place.
I think the strategy of involving Suisun City has been interesting. I've been following that. I know Mayor Hernandez. I know Brett, the city manager, really well. And both are intrigued, and I would give them credit for doing due diligence, not just rushing into anything, but really doing this. And 20,000, maybe 25,000 pages by the time this EIR is done. I'm looking forward to figuring out who's just going to read that whole thing.
I'm sure you will, Jared. I don't know if I will, but there'll be probably quite an executive summary that people can get into. And I think lawyers will read it, looking for issues that they can, and there'll be an opportunity for it to be contested. And there sure will be. That law allows for that. I think what we should do, as has been done for a lot of other projects in the state, is to cap the period You can't just sue on top of sue on top of sue. Well, people, anonymous folks just keep going at this just as a way to delay it. I think that it's a big project. It has big environmental implications. It should be studied. It should be very carefully thought through. And I think we're trying to be good stewards of the land and making that happen. And I just see, just driving over the land as you did and learning more about the different aspects of it, there's just going to be huge opportunities to do great environmental stuff here, along with build a city that's an environmental model for how cities should be built, along with providing jobs close to a city, which is environmental itself. So that people, Solano is one of the top out-commute counties in the whole country. 72% of the people go to their job outside the county. That's unhealthy. And people are taking these incredibly long commutes and incorporating that into their lives with 2 hours each way commutes to get to the Silicon Valley or get to San Francisco. It's just not reasonable. And we all see that massive traffic jam on Highway 80 and all of that. This could really change that and have so many more people be able to have a job and get to that job in 10 minutes, maybe by bike and that kind of thing, or by local transit. This is a new way of thinking of that isn't really new. It's just we didn't do it. We built cities that were all housing. We created jobs without housing to balance it, and we got what we got. And it doesn't have to be that way. And it's never too late to start doing it right. The fact that this land was never developed it could turn out to be a great thing, because it may be. And if you look at Solano, if you look at this area on a map, some would see it as a northeastern edge of the Bay Area, and some would see it as a southwestern end of Sacramento. But actually, it's the center of a budding larger region of the Northern California mega region. That's what's developed over time as people have moved and the populations have shifted and the commute patterns have changed. And we now see Solano County is really the center of that region. If you do something of significance in this area, it's going to have effects. And if you look at the economics, Barrett Council Economic Institute did a very extensive study. And it not only shows the power of the economy in Solano County and fiscally, how much state, federal, local governments are supported by doing this, but it affects the surrounding counties. There's going to be jobs everywhere in the construction and in the permanent jobs. Over 500,000 permanent jobs get created out of this project statewide. Now, a lot of them will be in the local area, but this is going to be a supply chain that Southern California is going to benefit from this.
I've heard that from the East Bay EDA, and they've mapped out, right? When you're talking about building this level of ships and advanced manufacturing, there's suppliers that have to come in. It impacts local airports. There's big potential around lots of options and other jobs to plug in to the economy and the ripple effect. But before we end today, what do you want the takeaway of this to be? What do you want people to know of this vision, and what are you asking for of our community?
We'd like the community to see this as an opportunity for the future of a county that's a bit down and out, that's seen some stress, especially at jobs. We want to see people to see an opportunity to build, to create manufacturing at scale in our state again. We remain, because of the size of the state, the largest manufacturing state in America, but we've lost a ton of manufacturing jobs in California. We'd like to see this as a chance to reverse that trend and have manufacturing jobs back to the benefit of our population and our economies. We'd like to see people say, enough's enough. We need the housing. We've seen the effect of shorting ourselves on housing construction, and it's driven prices way up, and our young people can't afford to live here, and that's wrong. Any region worth its salt plans for its future housing need. We planned for it, We just didn't build it. And we need to get serious about it. And it's infill development in existing cities is really hard. We know this. There's tremendous reluctance, all kinds of ways to slow it down, and real questions about to the extent that we should be changing the character of communities. To what extent do we really want to take a suburban community, whether it should have been built that way in the first place? That's how it was built. And now the region is largely, you could argue, built out. And you're not going to go put in big, tall buildings or really jam it in. People are afraid of that. They're afraid of the impacts of it. And there needs to be infill in cities, especially near where transit exists, where it makes the most sense to do it. But we can't be willy-nilly about it. And I think we always knew at Bay Area Council that we needed to do infill development. And we were behind many of the projects that we've seen go up around in the Bay Area, which I think have been largely successful. We always knew a big part of this is going to have to take place in green areas. We knew it. And it's time to get real with that and do it right. I think that's what we're starting to do.
Great. Jim Wunderman from California Forever. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Jared. It's a pleasure to join you. And I hope people will look at this. And we're seeing a lot of momentum in favor of this. You mentioned the poll, which if you'd polled last year is very different than now. And just the way people are talking, they want more information. They may be concerned, and they should be concerned about a project like this, but they're not necessarily against it. A lot of people are for it. A lot of people who are on the fence have moved to being for it. A lot of people who are against it have moved to the fence or for it. There's still a lot of people who need to be convinced, I think. And I think we owe it to the public to do a really good job of this. And this is a classic public-private partnership opportunity that could really be of high value to our communities and our people. I'm excited about it. I'm determined to make it happen and can't wait to live in one of the first units to get built.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Jim, for joining me today.
Thank you, and have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Capstone Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jared Asch and Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Leave us a review and share this episode with a friend.